the Sustainability Management Master's Program, you're answering one simple question. Do you care about your future generation? If you care about your kids, their grandkids, then you care about sustainability. And a sustainability manager is someone who has the tools to make people understand how they can contribute towards developing a sustainable world. We have both part-time and full-time students. Our curriculum is 30 hours. Instead of thesis, we have a research project course and a seminar course which provides them with the kind of research background they will need to be successful in their job. But at the same time, sustainability is not always everything about environment. It also relates to the business. They will take a sustainable business strategies course. They will take a project management course. Most of these courses are going to be taught by industry people, the people who are doing sustainability on a daily basis as a part of their job. Any organization that has a large number of employees and has a physical infrastructure, they will have to have a sustainability office. If you have the passion to develop and maintain a sustainable world, come to us and we will help you shape your passion into a career which will create an impact.
So yes, folks, I am one of Dr. Sarkar's last disciples of Montclair State. It was a good experience, definitely a very interesting one. We're sad to have seen him go, but now that he's involved in Stevens, we're very glad that he's dragged me along kicking and screaming. I'm going to do my best to switch over to the actual presentation, but a little bit about me while we're getting to that. So like Dr. Sarkar said, I founded NOMADICS. Originally it was Nomad Geomatics in 2006. Been in business for 20 years. I used to be an ecologist, and we used to do environmental work in construction. And that was a lot of ecological work, construction health and safety, hazardous waste remediation, a lot of GIS, due diligence, regulatory compliance. I used to count eggs and grab snakes and do bug seine netting and counting bugs for water quality. And so my real training is environmental and sustainability. Somehow over time, we got into engineering and defense and weapon work. It was entirely on accident because we were doing work for the Army Corps of Engineers and then NAVFAC, and then we were brought down to the BP spill for FEMA, got clearances, were made government contractors, and then in 2012, we got picked up for a program for the U.S. Navy under their very broad EHS, Environmental Health and Safety program support, which for everybody in this room, environmental health and safety means one thing, but for the U.S. Navy, it means something entirely else, like battle space management and asset inventory. And for them specifically was the health and safety of enlisted personnel around unmanned combat systems, for which I had no experience whatsoever, but I was sent to Bahrain, didn't know this until I arrived, met my team. I was the only civilian among a group of SWIC, SEALs, and Marines. Was informed then and there that I was their geospatial intelligence officer and their systems safety engineer for a litany of unmanned combat systems supporting 5th Fleet in Bahrain under CENTCOM, NAVCO5, for the Office of Naval Research. And I said, I have no idea what any of this is. And command said, well, you're smart, you're here, figure it out. So fast forward now to 2026, and we are, as Dr. Sarkar mentioned, nationally recognized subject matter experts in unmanned combat development for the United States Navy. We are now in our second year of supporting, just about our third year, supporting the United States Army here at Picatinny Arsenal on weapons prototyping for weapons futures. And if the government had not shut down for 48 hours, we would have had our first Air Force contract supporting the 363rd National Reconnaissance Intelligence Wing for geospatial intelligence stuff. So we are a unique little firm, that's for sure. So I'm going to do my best to figure out getting to the screen share part of this. You all bear with me. Screen.
Yes, we are seeing your screen. Yeah, that's good.
Fantastic. Everyone see the, oops.
Yep.
There we go. Everyone see okay?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Bear with me. I don't know which way to go. It's just perfect. Okay, so folks, here's our title screen. You can see us. We are one of the joint sponsors for this sustainability seminar series. In addition to the work that we do, a lot of sustainability goes into the large scale planning for both the micro and the macro scale for all the weapon systems that we are responsible for. That's everything from the hardware, software, logistics, training, delivery to the fleet, deployments, recapture, battery systems, engineering, energetics, disposal. So at large, from a 40,000 foot scale looking down, sustainability for the United States military especially has to do with maximizing the lifespan of every asset that's developed and minimizing the long-term logistical and material support that these systems are going to need. In other words, if the drone that we're designing, for argument's sake, has an 18-month lifespan in terms of the onboard energy system, its ability to maintain communications with the command and control pod, and its ability to run its mission without having to be picked up, resupplied, recharged, on and on and on, it allows for 18 months of continual mission operation, which is a huge leap forward from where things were when I first started 15 years ago, where one of the very first drone designs I ever worked on, the entire energetic system, I kid you not, was 600 AA batteries, double daisy chained together, because lithium ion cells that are all in our handheld devices, which we take for granted, were actually not approved for military use on ships of opportunity or submarines. So sustainability takes at least, and I can't speak up to a current administration, but every administration prior to, a very serious approach to minimizing the material usage and maximizing the life and usage availability for assets, facilities, logistics, supply, on and on and on. So it's a very pervasive and permeating mentality. Now, which is different than what I used to do in environmental sustainability, but it does have its place with an environmental impact, i.e., we don't want a litany of lithium ion powered drones sitting on the ocean floor if we can help it. All right, so I'm going to do my best to move forward. So we're very proud to be part of this. Thank you. Okay, great. So sustainability initiatives in the defense industry, navigating resilience, innovation, and strategic stewardship. Overall, across all of the defense industry, that's 6 armed services, United States Navy, Army, Marines, Coast Guard, Air Force, Space Force. But there's also all the other industries that are in the support system for the actual armed services. That's CDC, HHS, USDA, EHS, DHS, what? I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And so, believe it or not, there's an entire network of support agencies that go to support the armed services, specifically the Navy that we spend a lot of time supporting. The branches that we support underneath the United States Navy are NAVCO5, which is their energy, engineering and logistics, NAVSUP, which is supply and logistics, and NAVFAC, which is their facilities and logistics, oddly enough. The Army Corps of Engineers, although not part of the defense industry, ties very closely to a lot of the work that's done for the defense industry. So a lot of federal facilities on defense installations will be built either by the Army Corps of Engineers or the United States Army, Navy, NAVFAC that is doing that, running that specific facility. And sometimes there's a bit of an overlap. From a sustainability and an environmental permitting and compliance and construction standpoint, usually the most stringent rules are the ones that we adhere to. So in a project we're doing for Picatinny Arsenal for a new construction that we're developing up there, in addition to our actual weapons work, this facility is being built for the Army by private industry. So the rules we're going to adhere to are the Army's rules, not private industry rules, unless there's something very specific that we need to take into consideration. So every now and again, I'll stop. If there's anybody that has a question, please feel free to, I don't know if there's a hand raise or a, what did I do? I did something. Sorry, hang on. So every now and again, I'll take a stop. If there's a question, something that needs clarification, please feel free to interrupt me. I can do this all day. I will lose track of time. So at some point, someone please stop because
Yeah,
I'll
like if anybody wants to ask any question to Nick, like raise your online hand and we can ask him, or like hold your questions until the end of his formal presentation when we are going to open the Q&A.
thank you. It's not often I give lectures like this. More often than not, I'm doing it
Yeah, it's totally up to you if you want to make it more organic and basically entertain questions while you are talking. That's
Oh, good.
fine.
Yeah, I can certainly do that. Thank you.
Okay.
So again, a little bit about me. Like I said, I started in environmental engineering, planning, design. I started in GIS in 1999, 2000, when it was very much in its infancy. Esri ArcView 3.2 was just out on the market, and it was not yet the multi-billion-dollar ubiquitous software platform that it is today. So I have a lot of deep knowledge of how GIS functions all the way back to some of its earliest iterations. I'm fluent in multiple programming languages, although I wouldn't trust me to code anything these days. But I have a lot of experience developing very early on and then much more advanced program support within the Esri structure and platform. I started my company not long out of college because I saw that there was going to be a very specific need for GIS in the environmental and construction arenas, and was able to leverage that by leapfrogging through time, from one major project to another. We got our first big break on the BP spill in 2010. We got our first Navy contract in 2012 by accident. Our first $1 million in 19. First major Navy award in 2021. First Army award in 23. Our first Air Force award in 26. Fingers crossed. So we've built quite a team. I'm an entrepreneur by heart. At heart, I've got 2 businesses running currently. I've had 4 in total. I highly recommend if anybody has an idea for opening up a company, do it. Do it right now. As soon as this is over, go and pay the $75 and register your company. But don't leave your job. Have your business in the background. I worked part-time on my own firm till I went full-time in 2008. I'm considered a congressionally approved subject matter expert in unmanned combat systems. I've testified in front of Congress. I've been at the Pentagon. I've spent an exorbitant amount of my time and career developing, testing, evaluating, deploying, and recapturing a litany of unmanned combat systems, both autonomous and semi-autonomous. In effect, every major international incident that revolves around the Mediterranean, the Middle East, that's the Navy Fifth Fleet CENTCOM. I made aware of it. The Iranian bombing, I was on the phone. The Gaza-Israel conflict, I got a phone call. I've been ordered to report in and prepare for deployments that sometimes materialized, sometimes did not. My wife is not always thrilled when that phone call comes in, but it kind of comes with the territory. For 10 years, from 2010 to 2020, I was an educator at 6 different institutions. Environmental, GIS, construction, sustainability, has waste, policy, on and on. I'm working on my 2nd book. I've got about a dozen articles under my belt. We were named Business of the Year for Morris County 2025. I was named Environmental Educator of the Year 2014. I performed at Carnegie Hall once. I sang at the United Nations once. I got 2 great kids. I got a great wife. And maybe I'll go into politics when I've got nothing else to do. Okay. So just a little bit about me, that I'm not some nut job. Well, yes, but not off the street. Anyway, so today's focuses are sustainability versus defense, the overview, the initiatives, and the modern landscape. A big part of this is a lot has changed in the last year on the political landscape and the administrative implementations. We're going to focus on everything up until this point, because this point has been tumultuous at best. So the long-term legacy implementation of the sustainability implementation of defense policy, or policy within defense, excuse me, I think is going to have much more of a resonating impact than anything currently. The current administration, politics aside, is much more chaotic and jerky, and the whipsaw mentality of the implementation of decisions has opted for folks to be much more of a well, if we don't need to change these things unless explicitly told to do so, we're not going to. So we're going to hope for the best in long term. Then we'll move into some of our specific initiatives of what we're doing for sustainable support and defense, and then why sustainability drives defense and how it may affect the future. Hold on one second. Had not been?
Text, sent you a text, I just need an answer.
Love you, babe.
It's not strong. Is it there?
Stroller's there. I forgot. My wife's going to pick up the kids. I forgot to take the stroller home. Okay, so generally speaking, this is stuff that we should know already. 3 pillars of sustainability: planet, people, and profit. It's about resource management and conservation. It's humanity-driven, material efficiency, market resiliency, and overall the art of adaptability. We want to ensure that there is the conservation of resources for long-term usage, which is different from preservation. Conservation and sustainable utilization of resources drives a lather, rinse, repeat, recyclable mentality to stretch existing resources beyond the normal capacity. And unfortunately, where we are as a culture, as a society, first world nations, we've evolved past the values of our previous generations of thrift and repair and like fixing our own shirts and making meals stretch longer, to a very throwaway society. And sustainability as a mentality, a paradigm shift, is making the attempt to pull that back so that there is less resource utilization, because resource utilization creates waste. You have to go and get the raw materials, you have to produce the thing, you have to transport the thing, you have to spend money on the thing. And so by minimizing resource utilization, it minimizes the environmental impact at the source, and has a ripple effect across the entire lifespan of the thing. Everybody good so far? Excellent. Stunned silence is very reassuring. So how this intersection of defense and sustainability? The operational readiness is systems critical. And I know that sounds like a very dull concept, but if you've not spent a lot of time in the defense sector, as I imagine most folks in this space would not have, this is something that we preach every day. Between operational readiness and operational security, it allows us to stay at the very forefront of the unexpected. So the mission resilience and the energy independence, the transition to microgrids and the reduction of fuel tethering ensures bases and units can remain operational. There's always the concern of any facility, both domestic and abroad, losing their ability to have communications, have energy. The import of being able to have a backup system or being able to operate without a supply line for as long as possible allows for a forward operating base, of which I've been on many, to be as functional as humanly possible for as long as possible. That way you are not worried about any kind of a terminal shutdown that would endanger the lives of the enlisted and non-enlisted personnel supporting it. The supply chain continuity, the securing sustainable domestic sources for critical materials, presents production bottlenecks for high-tech defense systems. We saw this exact problem during COVID, which changed the entire planning for the defense supply chain at large. As soon as we saw COVID hit, there was a shutdown in trade, a shutdown in transit routes, and people certainly just weren't going and doing anything. And that had an impact on not just what people were doing in the civilian world, but in the defense world. Case in point, there were projects that we were working on as defense contractors that we were still contractually responsible for making deliveries to the United States government, but there wasn't anybody there to receive these deliveries. And I mean actual hardware. And so hardware that we would deliver, whether it was finished or not, and we would tell them in advance because we couldn't get the pieces that we needed. There was a shutdown of the supply of the manufacturer. People just simply weren't going to work. We had to make deliveries all the same, but they were incomplete. And so what happened was we were tasked with finding acceptable alternatives, local acceptable alternatives for the missing pieces. And with those changes to supply lines, there's an immediate cost for re-engineering and pivoting and the timelines for the actual delivery of the thing. Now, keep in mind that we specialize in unmanned combat systems. You're talking drones 16 feet long that cost $15 million each, inside of which are all sorts of sensors and energetics and semi-autonomous components, a lot of command and control, a lot of communication modules, on and on stuff. Lots and lots of very expensive things. So this created a real conundrum for minimizing the bottlenecks that we unfortunately learned the hard way. And we became very accustomed to having, even in the defense manufacturing space, everything we needed readily available. And we had built budgets and timelines based on that readily available material. When those things changed, we had to go back to the government and effectively plead the case that we needed to make what's called a temp alt, alteration to the program and the contract and the weapon system itself to change for an acceptable alternative. We had to determine costs, timelines, re-engineering of all of the necessary components in order to still make this mission deliverable. So it really does have an impact. But the upside is now that we've been able to make much more sustainable decisions, localized, readily available now within arm's reach of the facility where we're developing these things with locally made materials, in some cases recycled materials, it has now created a self-fulfilling prophecy of being able to make much more educated decisions on long-term implications for weapon delivery. All good so far? I know it's a lot. Okay, good, great. Everyone hear me okay?
Okay,
Beautiful.
Temba, Choga.
Yes,
All good?
yeah, all good. I just had a question.
Sure.
So, in terms of sustainability, does it then become most important in terms of engineering for the design, or what is most important is the operational nature after the design has been delivered? What becomes most important in terms of sustainability when you're talking about engineering?
It really does depend on who the authorizing entity is and what they're willing to accept. So, and I'm going to make the attempt to switch to my headset here. It's not always a fast, it's not always a hard and fast response for something like that. More often than not, it is a mission, whatever's most mission effective, whatever is going to satisfy the mission requirements in the path of least resistance, both in the timeline and the budgetary scope. Now, in my experience, especially, my father was in business for 35 years, VP of marketing and sales, would tell me that in business, it's the magic triangle. You can have things fast, right, cheap, but you can only pick two. And so we would have to make the case to whomever our contracting officer was, and then ultimately to the captain who was running the program, that these operational changes would have to be made outside of our control. Here are the options that you can pick from. This one will be the most costly, but the fastest. This one will be the least cost, best value, but will also be the slowest. And we may fall outside of the operational timelines and the milestones schedule that we've been contractually obligated to. We'll make our best effort to stay within, but if we fall outside, we have to then make a contract amendment. So it really does depend. If command says we have to have this thing, they will make amendments. They'll dedicate more funding. They'll dedicate more personnel. They will do the thing that they need to do. If it's a less important program, okay, will this thing still work? Will we get 85% of what we want? Will it still work? Yes. Okay, fine, then do that. So I'll give you a good example. We're responsible for probably about a dozen different unmanned combat systems to this point, almost one every year. Some of them are surveillance. Some of them are active combat. Some of them are mine layers. Some of them are mine detectors. And one time, it was just a handheld device for object detection in the water. The handheld device for object detection in the water was less important than the things that were out there looking for submarines in the Red Sea that don't like us very much, that are owned by countries that don't like us very much. So when there's only so much funding to utilize and one of these things happens, you have to make the case, and effectively it's mother may I, and get back the feedback. In some cases, we've been told, figure it out. You're the contractor, we pay you lots of money, figure it out for us. That's what we pay you for. Does that answer the question somewhat?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yep.
Good. I'm going to put this on pause for
Phil?
1 second. Let's see if I can get my Bluetooth to connect. Stand by. While that's happening, I can take another question while we're
Yes, Phil is
Googling.
ready with a question.
Fabulous.
Phil, mute.
You're mute.
Yeah, Nick, thanks for actually almost answering the question I was going to ask. You mentioned getting up to captain level for a particular program and such. Similar to management in industry, what levels did you have to get up to for certain of these operational programs for approvals for those changes? Obviously, they weren't all at junior officer level. Most of them were sure beyond that. But what was your experience with that?
Sometimes it was captain level, sometimes it was just a program office level. It depended on if it was a monetary change or if it was a mission and engineering change and what those costs were going to look like. More often than not, my specific role as a systems safety engineer would be to present them with the problem I've identified and options for the necessary remediation to fix said problem. And I would hand it off to my superiors and they would take it where they felt it needed to go to get the answers necessary. In some cases, the problem would come down from on high and I was told to just fix it. In which case I would ask, do I have a budget to adhere to, or am I just to fix the problem and worry about it later? More often than not, depending on who it came from. For example, most recently was one from SOCOM. SOCOM just said, fix it, we'll deal with the budgeting issue later. I had to get permission from Captain Allen to be borrowed from 408 to SOCOM for this problem I was being tasked to fix. Said, yeah, I got the approval and we'll build a program later, whatever it costs to fix this problem that SOCOM is demanding that you fix. Does that answer?
Yep. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Now, keep in mind, folks, that 60% of our work does come from the government, half of which is the federal and defense, and then the other 30% is state, county, local, academic, nonprofit. The other 40% of our work comes from the private sector. Verizon, SHI, Telefonica UK, Vodafone, Tetra Tech, Mott MacDonald, and a whole smattering of smaller engineering firms that do utilize our engineering experience and our geospatial intelligence capabilities for private sector support. Case in point, if anybody has Verizon, first off, I'm sorry, but if anybody has Verizon's 5G, their 5G signal used to be a defunct military frequency called C-band, of which we are experts in because every drone I ever designed up until 2022 used to run on C-band for their communication frequency. It was a $52 billion acquisition that Verizon made without doing their due diligence. We got called in by their director of business intelligence, whose corporate headquarters is in Basking Ridge, New Jersey, 20 minutes from our office. And I explained to them that unfortunately, the horse that they bet on, a mid-range, high-energy frequency, does not have the necessary long-term coverage, long-distance coverage that they were hoping for. And they looked at me kind of funny and said, well, how do you know this? I said, because we as NAVCO5 realized that we couldn't use it, which is why we sold it to you, hoping that you could use it in the commercial sector. So if anybody's noticed that Verizon Wireless has not fully evolved from their 4G LTE into their 5G coverage outside of urban markets, that's a big reason why. So we are very fortunate that we've got a very significant overlap between our work for the government and our work for the private sector. So anyway, continuing on, a big strategic risk that is usually brought up is climate as a threat multiplier. And I've been screaming about this ever since I got into defense work to begin with, that environmental instability is going to drive global unrest, global civil unrest, and necessitates military intervention in increasing volatile regions. A big issue for the United States Navy, which I've been screaming about for decades, most United States Navy facilities are along the coastline. A big problem for the United States Navy with facilities along the coastline is sea level rise. And we've been yelling about this for ages. And they have actually taken it seriously up until, unfortunately, very recently. Everyone in this room knows that climate change, global warming is not a hoax. It's a very real thing. And the Defense Department has been very aware of it for decades. And they had in place very significant climate mitigation for defense industry. And so sea level rise and deterioration of infrastructure, the thinning of the ice sheets, all are things that the United States military is very aware of. In addition to that, the defense industry has something that's what we qualify as soft influence. So when USAID was closed, it was a humongous blow to, believe it or not, the DoD, because we, as defense, rely on a lot of the locale and local support of areas that we are operating within. And a big way to get people to support American interests and American influence and American presence is to feed the locale. And so suddenly, when we're there doing environmental and reconstruction and general construction, because when we're overseas, and right now we have a 99-year lease with the Kingdom of Bahrain for where CENTCOM is, we don't just build the facility where we're going to operate. We generally do a lot of support and infrastructure and new construction for the locales where we're operating within, and bringing the locals in for employment and sustainability and. So taking into consideration that environmental instability is going to drive up civil unrest, you're looking at global climate shift, you're looking at more intense storms, you're looking at more damage. Over time, this is going to become an issue where we are going to be exhausting resources. Excuse me, more coffee. I've been up since 5:30 with my 1-year-old, so it's been a day. Okay, so geopolitical and asset vulnerability, sea level rise, extreme weather, threaten billion-dollar coastal installations. I think I just covered all of this within competitive theaters of operation. All good so far? Fabulous.
Hey, I have a question.
Sure. I'm sorry. I can't always tell the.
Yeah, like Mario, like next time, raise your hand.
Oh, sorry.
No problem.
Sorry. Oh,
You're
okay.
already in. Come on.
Oh, I was wondering what was the effect of US aid closing down on the Defense Department again?
So the closing of USAID at writ large is a travesty. A lot of our friends, a lot of good friends we have there, lost their jobs. A lot of people worldwide are now going hungry, are going without medication. It is an absolute disaster. We are hoping, as people, that once this administration ends and the new administration takes over in 2029, that USAID will be restored. We know they had problems. Every industry does, every agency does, but hopefully this will be an opportunity for them to get restored and repaired and made better. What USAID does, it's funny, I had this conversation with my wife why this was so important, is that a good chunk of the defense industry, especially the enlisted personnel, case in point, when we were in Afghanistan, we as United States defense, both civilian and enlisted and contractors, rely very heavily on the locals to support us for infrastructure, food, local knowledge, information, geopolitical support. A big reason why we were able to depend on them so heavily is that our presence there really boosts the local economy, but we also bring with it a lot of relief through USAID, which USAID buys massive amounts of surplus crops from American farmers, rice, soybeans, wheat, corn, which these staples are easy to transport and they last forever if well, not forever, but they last long enough to make it overseas and are easily distributable to areas that need food. And when you're feeding people, that soft influence makes them want to help you. And so we as defense would rely very heavily on local support. Like when I was in Bahrain, I was dumped there by myself. Now, there's a fully operational NAVC, NAVC 1 and NAVC 2 out there. I didn't know that. I was told to contact, Peter when I arrived. Thankfully, Peter knew where I was and knew who I was, but I depended very heavily on the new friends that I made while I was stationed out there to tell me where to eat, where to go and where not to go. And USAID made a lot of that possible because we would feed them, we would bring clothing, we would bring medicine, vaccines, Doctors Without Borders. And so USAID was responsible for all of that soft influence, from the people of the United States. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It's just very interesting connection that I never heard about. So thank you.
You're welcome. And like I said, that's why the DoD doesn't operate within a bubble. We are supported very heavily by a litany of other agencies. What I will say is that the DoD has its own operational language, and spanning that gap is very, very challenging if you're not familiar with it. But from the USAID standpoint, this was a dramatic loss, not just for the people who are going hungry without medication around the world, but for us as American citizens. It has effectively made us less safe, not just here at home, but overseas. So, the friends that I have around the world are less likely to help me if I have to be someplace that's not here tucked safely in New Jersey, if you can imagine that. You know what I mean? So,
Divya,
sorry? Oh, yes.
yeah, we are hearing a lot of feedback, Divya. Go ahead. Now you are muted.
She's coming to ask here. She's in the class.
Oh, okay. All right.
So my question is that in terms of innovation, um, what factors are necessary individuals who work in the technical roles to achieve sustainability?
We'll get there. But the short version is all learning is knowledge and therefore good. And the DoD, unfortunately, for the longest time has been very risk averse. And so implementing new technologies historically speaking, has been a very long and slow and arduous process not because the technology isn't necessarily good. It needs to go through an inordinate amount of approvals to verify that it is safe, effective, efficient, programmatically, funding-wise, responsible, and does what it is supposed to meet the minimum mission requirements. So innovation, historically speaking, is a very slow crawl. A lot of that is changing right now with a lot of the contract acquisitions for government. So historically speaking, there is the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulations, through typically GSA, which is the General Services Administration, which, as a defense contractor, our three largest military contracts, one Navy, two Army, each took between 18 and 20 months to get from a time of submission to the time of award. Now, the one we just received on January 26th of 2026, the day of the snowstorm, is something we submitted in May of 24. That's 18 months worth of lost time innovation where technology has leapt forward and a lot of materials are obsolete by then. They're changing a lot of that now by changing the way the government does business. Now, again, all politics aside, I understand some of the logic for the changes that this administration is making. Some of them. What they're doing now is shifting towards things that are called OTAs, or other transaction authorities, which allows the government to spend money faster to get the things that they want, which is, if they've identified a technology that they believe, even if it's not entirely proven, if they believe that it has the potential for, a brand new technology or an innovation on existing technology of getting ahead of our adversaries, they're going to make the investment in 8 to 12 weeks instead of 12 to 18 months. And so innovation at the moment seems to be driving a lot of their decision making, which is part of the reason why there is currently $1 trillion defense budget that is slated to get another $500 billion added on top of that for the next fiscal year. Does that answer the question enough, or was there any part that I missed?
Yes, Nick, thank you.
You're very welcome. So picking up here, projected footprint, land and resource stewardship, the proactive management of millions of acres of training ranges ensures that these areas maintain viable for realistic maneuvers, including go and no-go restrictions. Life cycle and energy management, reducing the institutional carbon bootprint, which I always thought was cute, through fleet electrification and the mitigation of legacy hazardous materials like chlorinated solvents, TCE, PCE, and PFAS to lower long-term liability. Is everybody here familiar with PFAS? They may or may not. Chlorinated solvents, TCE, PCE, and PFAS are very big issues. Is anybody familiar or not familiar? See a lot of nodding heads?
Quite a few people are familiar with.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Good. So this is important to understand, that things like exposure to PFAS, burn pits, much like Agent Orange during the Vietnam War, actively expose our enlisted, our enlisted folks are volunteers. They're paid, but they sign up to serve in the country's military. They've been inadvertently exposed to carcinogens, cancer-causing toxic fumes, toxic water, on and on and on. And the VA, the Veterans Administration, if you want to talk about a by proxy utilization of funding, through guilt by association, veterans are coming home with physical ailments, mental ailments, cancers, and the DoD. There's a lot of press saying, well, they're absolving themselves of any liability. They're saying they didn't get these things from the burn pits. We all know that they absolutely did. And in order to, treat veterans as they ought to be treated, the VA spends a lot of money to treat, rehabilitate, hospitalize folks that have been exposed to a lot of these, things like burn pits, TCE, PFAS. What they're realizing now is, if they stop using these chemical components, the likelihood of people's exposure will go down. It's the broken plate mentality. If you were to take a dinner plate and smash it to pieces and glue it back together again, functionally it's a dinner plate, but it will never hold liquid or solids the way it used to. But it'll still function as a dinner plate. The best way to avoid the treatment or remediation of anything is to not break it in the first place. So by eliminating the utilization of chlorinated solvents and PFAS specifically, it eliminates the need for that ripple effect spending down the line, which then allows for those dollars to be put towards other more important programs. A good example is a project that I was on years and years ago, right here in New Jersey, in Powhatan, was for the Army Corps, the development of a water treatment facility, a pump and treat plant, where we had drilled a whole series of wells around this very large facility that was now residential apartments. And so here we are in this massive, what looked like a old warehouse, drilling injection wells, extraction wells, and monitoring wells by the score, and pulling up all kinds of chemical compounds that we now need to treat. So dilution was a solution by treating the water and pumping it back in again. And this plant's going to run until I retire and then some. So I'm building the plant, doing the health and safety, taking the samples, and I'm noticing the chemicals that we are pulling out from these testing wells are all chlorinated solvents. And I'm looking at this facility, this gigantic superstructure, which is now currently residential, and I'm saying nothing about this makes any sense. And we're doing it for the Army Corps, but oddly enough, NAVFAC is involved and NAVC is involved. Why? Well, you start going through the site's history, and this massive superstructure used to be a lingerie factory. At least that's what the public was told. And you're saying to yourself, why in God's name am I pulling? I mean, at this point, the amount of chemical exposure that's coming out of the ground is significant enough to trigger an EPA and a Superfund and an Army Corps response. But a lingerie factory doesn't make any sense. Well, because I have clearances and because I have access to a lot of information that the usual folks don't have, I found out through a lot of navigation that I was brought specifically on this project for the Army Corps because I'm Navy cleared. And what this facility actually was a World War II. If anybody's familiar with radium and tubes and old military technology, this superstructure was disguised as a lingerie factory, but in fact was actually producing Navy battleship components, radar, tubes, screens, dials, on and on and on. And they were dumping the waste, chlorinated solvents and paints and radium and you name it, into the storm drains, into the waste pits underneath the facility. And the plume underneath was just massive. And so now you have people that are living in this superstructure who are now exposed to this through the fumes coming up through the vents.
Hey, Nick.
Yes, sir.
Mariel has a question, and also we have 10 more minutes.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Okay.
No problem. We are enjoying
Sorry,
it.
I'll keep a quick question. Was this part of the Manhattan Project, the across the country, or was it just part of like a naval program?
I never got any further into it. Was a naval program for instrument development. What those instruments were doing, I took my best guess that they were, because of my limited knowledge and limited exposure and what records I could find, made the leap that they were for battleship components. I could be wrong. I didn't find anything in the records that would lead me to believe that it had anything to do with the nuclear program. Again, I could be completely wrong. Doesn't mean I'm always right, but in this circumstance, my clearance is being standard secret. This is what I had access to. And that was part of the reason why I was brought on that project multiple times, because I understood the very different languages between defense and government construction. Does that answer?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to see if I can rip through some of these other slides because we took the time. Okay, a couple of quick case studies. Sea level rise and coastline installation. It's a direct threat to critical infrastructure. Good example is the Nav Station Norfolk. Diego Garcia, the British Indian Ocean community. These impacts increased frequency of sunny day flooding, degradation of piers, runways, and dry docks, infrastructure, and the rising cost for barrier construction and base relocation. Every time you have to build a new dune, build a new pier, move a base, the costs are just astronomical. And so, again, broken plate theory. If you don't need to keep rebuilding things because the sea level, if you're able to stabilize sea level rise, you won't need to keep rebuilding and relocating things because this is all very expensive. Okay, we're going to keep on cruising. Stop me at any point. Efficiency in development and hardware durability, extending the life cycle of platforms, aircraft, vehicles, and ships to reduce waste and reduce the rate of failure. You want them to last longer, be more durable, minimize repair. The energy use, the transitioning to microgrids and hybrid electric propulsion where feasible. If you're working off of a microgrid, then you are localized power. You are not at risk of being turned off by the detonation of a pipeline or the cutting of the energy lines leading to a facility. You are self-sustaining. Hybrid electric propulsion for ships, battlefield vehicles, minimizes the need for fuel deliveries, minimizes the need for nuclear waste. the design philosophy of incorporating modular open systems to allow upgrades without replacing entire units. In other words, if we could all, like using our cell phones, if you could swap the camera out, swap the battery out, swap the memory out, you wouldn't need to replace the whole damn thing, which would minimize new resources and minimize the waste. DoD is moving into that space where a lot of our drones, if we need to swap out the sensor, swap out the hardware, swap out the propulsion, the energy system, they're designed in such a modular way, very much like Henry Ford started with interchangeable parts. Everything is designed with a somewhat universalized approach. Every battery system, at least dimension-wise, fits in as it should. Every sensor payload, pull it out, swap in the new one, and off it goes. So you aren't replacing a $16 million drone every time there's a mission change. You're swapping out just the sensor payload or changing out the ordnance payload. Okay, sustainability as a strategic capability, the paradigm shift, transitioning from compliance-driven ESG to a sustainability as a capability. That's the direction that we're going in. We want to minimize the resource utilization because it costs money, plain and simple. DoD, for all of its massive budgeting, is still very, very cheap. They want to minimize everything that they're spending money on. Case in point, as a defense contractor, you would think make lots of money. No, our profit margin is like 9% at best. And we get beaten up by DoD all the time to use as little as possible and do as much as you possibly can. You become an expert at doing everything with nothing. It's really amazing. Operational alignment, decarbonization as a tool to reduce the tether of fuel and to increase the tool-to-tail ratio. You want to trade off the governance where the explicit frameworks to prioritize lethality and reliability while seeking efficiency. And the current 2026 aims from the previous administration, I want to put that in a big asterisk, is integrating climate risk into the national defense strategy as a core element of the industrial base resilience. And if anybody can see this, here it is, the 2026 National Defense Strategy that just came out from the current Secretary of Defense. Moving on. I have to read this stuff. Like, it's nuts. It's stuff you have to read to keep up on. I have a 90-hour billable work week. It is just crazy. I heard you laughing, right? It's like people are like, oh, you're CEO, you can make up your own hours. Yes, I get to choose which 16 hours a day I want to work, Okay, so microgrid islanding, moving beyond backup generators to smart microgrids to sustain mission essential functions, zonal shore power and decoupled energy sourcing, adopting shipboard power distribution logic for rapid recovery and cybersecurity at shore installations. In other words, if you can hook a military facility up to a nuclear powered vessel that can power that facility, fantastic. Have it there for a while. Utilizing third-party financing to deploy on-site renewables without depleting procurement budgets. In other words, if you've got the budget, but you can't spend it on energy, you can bring in third-party monies for specific critical infrastructure. Overall, the objective is to improve the mission assurance through energy independence and hardened climate-ready infrastructure. Believe it or not, a lot of the government's infrastructure is 50 to 75 years old. So you're operating in some facilities that are just post-World War II in a 2026 world. It is amazing the stuff we used to dig out from Joint Base Andrews. Actually, Dr. Sarkar, right when you left is when I got deployed to support Air Force One down there. The stuff we pulled out, that was just nuts. Okay. How much time we have left? 4 minutes?
We have 4 minutes, but again, Hudson has his hand raised, so go
Go
ahead.
for it.
All right, I had a quick question.
Sure.
You talked just about how you could have a nuclear vessel powering a facility, like offshore. I just saw something today, actually, like thinking about nuclear vessels being installed off cities, and or mostly on water, in order to like help power the city, create like dual grid, that kind of thing. What are your thoughts on like the feasibility of that idea?
I mean, I love it, but it's not a long-term solution. It's for critical infrastructure. It's for short-term emergency response. Those vessels are designed and intended and mission-driven to be out on the open water, doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing. Now, if they're on loan for a little while for a specific duration of time for a specific reason, that's way above my pay grade. I'm all for it, but it is not you know, a nuclear powered aircraft carrier with what, 10,000 enlisted personnel on board cannot be sitting dockside powering an installation for 3 months.
Right. That makes sense.
So you're welcome. Listen, I'm all for it in emergencies. I've seen it done, but it is not a long-term solution. Usually those are implemented when the development of critical infrastructure is underway. Like there was a program in Guam that we were supporting, the clearing of 90 some odd acres for a listening station. But there was nothing out there to support the necessary energy requirements for the construction of a listening station. So they had to tether for X amount of days. Okay, I think what we're going to try and do is, I think we got 2 minutes. What I'd like to do is, let me take a look and see how much of this is left. We probably can make this available.
Yes, that was
Okay.
what I was thinking. If you can send it to me, I'm going to circulate it so that again,
Yes,
and
I would
next
like everybody
semester
to
you can
see
come
this.
back and talk a little bit more details on some of these case studies.
Yeah, you know me, Doc. I overdeveloped and started
That's fine. Like again,
running into
I
stories.
that's fine. I like this format.
Mhm.
Like again, it was very interactive. So yeah, send it to me. We have run out of time. Like we have just 1 minute left. But send it to me. I'm going to circulate it to these people who are here today. And then again, as I said, next semester, we can continue this discussion.
We sort of pick up right off where we left off.
Yeah, man, like this was really interesting. We typically are not privy to insider information, and we got to know some of these things. And I had my hunch that again, some of the infrastructures are really old and they need to be changed. And unfortunately, that's what it is, and they have a long way to go.
Yes,
But
very much so.
thanks so much, Nick, and not only for this, but also for